Welcome to the Tech Mind Factory video blog. I'm super excited that you visited my channel. I hope you will find this video helpful and interesting. If so, please subscribe at the end because this will be the sign for me to produce more videos. And now, enjoy watching. This is another video from the series Be a Better Azure Developer. And in this video, I would like to talk about Microsoft Identity Platform. Almost every application is somehow secure. Users can register, sign in, authenticate. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge for developers to secure their applications because authentication and authorization is not an easy topic. That is why Microsoft provides Microsoft Identity Platform, and this is the topic we are going to discuss today in this video. So let's start. First of all, it's worth to mention what is Microsoft Identity Platform. So Microsoft Identity Platform is an evolution of Azure Active Directory Developer Platform. And it allows developers to build applications that sign in all Microsoft identities and get tokens to call Microsoft APIs. So like Microsoft Graph API or APIs that we developers have built. So if we have, for instance, ASP.NET Core Web API, we can secure it with Microsoft Identity Platform. And I also encourage you to visit official documentation of Microsoft Identity Platform using the link that is displayed on this slide, because this topic is huge. So in this video, we will make an introduction and discuss only some most important parts. So as I mentioned, Microsoft Identity Platform is evolution from Azure Active Directory for developers. And there are some main differences between version 1 and version 2. So first of all, it's worth to mention that in Azure Active Directory for developers, we use Azure Active Directory Authentication Library, so ADL, to implement authentication in our applications like mobile apps. In Microsoft Identity Platform, so version 2, there is a new library set called Microsoft Authentication Library. And we can use this library with many different platforms like mobile apps, like Xamarin for instance, so Android, iOS. We can use with desktop apps, Universal Windows Platform, UWPF. We can secure web applications like Angular for instance. So many different types of platforms can be secure with Microsoft Authentication Library and Microsoft Identity Platform. And also with Azure Active Directory for developers, it was possible to sign in users with their work or school accounts, so Azure Active Directory accounts. But with Microsoft Identity Platform, we can also enable access for personal accounts. So if someone has Microsoft account, it's possible to sign in. And also we can integrate external identity providers like Facebook, Google or LinkedIn and enable authentication with those services. Okay, great. So Microsoft Identity Platform enables us developers to secure many different types of applications, as I mentioned. So it can be single page application written with Angular, it can be web app like Razor Pages, it can be web API like ASP.NET Core, or background process like daemon application or console application. We can also use Microsoft Identity Platform with mobile apps like Android, iOS, Xamarin Platform, and of course desktop applications like Universal Windows Platform or UWPF. So it's really much easier to implement authentication and authorization using Microsoft Identity Platform. So let's see some interesting details. Microsoft Identity Platform consists of few parts, I would say. So it consists of OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect standard compliant authentication service. So that's very important. It's based on the standards. It provides open source libraries. So as I mentioned, there is Microsoft Authentication Library available for different platforms like for Xamarin, for UWPF, or Angular or React. There is also application management portal, so we can use this portal to register applications and enable secure access. There is also application configuration API and PowerShell. So using Microsoft Graph API, we can manage application configuration. And there is also a great developer content, so conceptual and reference documentation is available in Microsoft documentation. So once again, I encourage you to check the link displayed below on this slide. So with reference to the Microsoft Identity Platform and different scenarios, there are many different scenarios supported and many different supported authentication flows. So we can, for instance, use Microsoft Identity Platform and Microsoft Authentication Library to secure access from single page application like Angular to the web API that is written in the ASP.NET Core. Or we can provide secure communication between web application like Razor Pages and web API. We can also provide authentication for users in our mobile apps. So if we have application written in Xamarin, it's also possible to implement sign-in or registration for users and provide secure access to the backend, so to the web API. So there are many different scenarios available and covered by Microsoft Identity Platform. So I really encourage you to check the documentation because those scenarios are described there in details. Okay, great. So that was a brief introduction, and right now I would like to present some demo and see the whole concept in action. So let's jump in. And before that, I would like to also encourage you to visit my GitHub and Identity Developer Templates repository, because this is the place where I will constantly add new samples related with Microsoft Identity Platform. And of course, the sample I will present in this demo is also available in the Identity Developer Templates repository on my GitHub. Okay, let's start. Here it is, Visual Studio 2019, and as you can see in the Identity Developer Templates solution, there are 4 projects. But in this video, we will concentrate on 2 of them. So Identity Developer Templates.AzureAD.API and Identity Developer Templates AzureAD.UWP. So we will use Universal Windows Platform in this demo. We will sign in, and then we will try to call the ASP.NET Core Web API with the received token, and we will try to display some data related with user. So let's go through this demo first, and after that we will discuss implementation details. I started ASP.NET Core Web API project right now, and we can see that default endpoint is user. So there is user controller that we will use to access the data about the user profile. But right now we can see that there is an authorized return 401. So we can only access this endpoint, this user endpoint, only with the access token received from the Azure Active Directory. So first of all, we have to sign in and authenticate, and we will do it using Universal Windows Platform application. So let's open it. Here is the Universal Windows Platform application that I created, and it's integrated with Azure Active Directory using Microsoft Authentication Library. There is sign in button, and if we click it, there is a window open, and here I can provide my username and password related with my Microsoft account. So let's do it right now, and then I can click sign in button, and after a few seconds I should receive the access token, as you can see. So right now we can use this access token to call the ASP.NET Core Web API endpoint, so the user endpoint in this case. So let's see how to do it using Postman. So here is the Postman, and first of all we have to copy this user endpoint address from the browser, and we have to paste it in Postman, and we will use HTTP GET method. For the authorization we will use bearer token type, and here in the token box I have to paste the token I received from the Azure Active Directory in the UWP application. And right now we can click Send button, and after a few seconds we should see the response with status 200 OK. We can see the ID of the users, and we can also see the name. So in this case, this is my name. Great. So right now we securely accessed the web API using Postman. But you can try to imagine that in the real world you can have, for instance, a different mobile applications like Android and iOS, and in this case you would like to provide secure access to the backend. So in this case, web API written in ASP.NET Core, for instance. Great, so right now let's discuss implementation details. Here is the Azure portal and Azure Active Directory tab. And from the left bar, I selected App Registrations. And as you can see, I registered two applications. The API application, so in this case ASP.NET Core Web API, and also Universal Windows Platform application. I did it using New Registration button here. So if we click it, we can provide the name of the application, and also we can select supported account types. So we can decide that only accounts in our organization directory will be able to sign in, or accounts in any organization directory, so it's called multi-tenant, or accounts in any organization plus personal Microsoft accounts, like live.com or outlook.com. And then we can also specify redirect URI for the web application and also for the native application like UWP platform. But of course we can specify it later. And once we create register button, there will be a management blade displayed where we can configure the access. So let's see what's happening in the web API. Here is the management blade for the API application that I registered in the Azure Active Directory. And we can see that there is application ID provided and also directory ID, so the tenant ID. And those values are required to set up the authentication in the applications. And what else is really important is the fact that there is a tab called Expose an API. And here we can decide to expose the web API and to provide access to this web API from the client app, like in this case Universal Windows Platform. We can do it by clicking Add a Scope, and here we can decide to create a new scope. And of course we have to also provide the information about consent. So this information will be displayed to users when they try to sign in our application. So there will be information that this application would like to access your profile or your mails, etc. Yeah, so this is really important to display this information to users because they can either accept or reject. So once I expose this API in the management blade for Universal Windows Platform application, of course there is also client ID and directory ID provided, but there is a section called API permissions. And in this section we can decide to which API we will have access from this registered client application, so in this case Universal Windows Platform. And as you can see, there are two permissions. So first permission is to access this API. So we can see that if I click this permission, there is a delegated permission and we would like to access this web API as a user. So once we secure the web API in the Visual Studio with Azure Active Directory, we will be able to call it with the token received in the UW platform application. And of course, the second permission is to access Microsoft Graph and use and get the user profile in this case. So it's also worth to mention that we can define different permissions, not only for our own APIs, but we can also decide whether the application will have access to Microsoft Graph API, for instance. Okay, great. So now let's get back to Visual Studio and let's see what's happening there. Let's start from the Universal Windows Platform application. If I expand this project, we can see that there is Authentication Service class. And this class using SDK provided by Microsoft Authentication Library. So, in this project, we are using Microsoft Identity Platform library called Microsoft Authentication Library. We can add this library as NuGet package by right-clicking on the project we can select Manage NuGet Packages, and here we can see that Microsoft Identity Client is installed. And we will use this client library to provide authentication for users, so to enable sign in. I can close this tab right now, and let's open Authentication Service. In this authentication service, we can see that there is interface called iPublic Client Application, and we have to configure the instance of this interface with some details we copy from the Azure portal. So we have the client ID, for instance. So this is the client ID that was displayed in the blade for the Universal Windows Platform registered in Azure portal in the Azure Active Directory. We have to also provide the authority, so the address under which users will be able to sign in. And we have to also specify redirect URI, so where the token has to be returned. And below there is authenticate method, and as we can see, there is a method called acquire token silent. And we can provide the scopes, so we can provide the information to which scope user will have access with this specific token returned from the Azure Active Directory. And of course we can pass some accounts if we already sign in before. But if accounts collection is empty, there will be SAL UI require exception thrown, and we can see also that if there is information that no account or login hint was pasted to the acquire token silent call, we should recall and handle first time authentication. And this is what's happening in this method. So there is a method called handle first time authentication, and here we can call acquire token interactive. So this is why when we first time try to sign in, there is this window open, and here we can type address, email address and password. So that's why we see this window when I click sign in button. And once we receive the token, it's saved in the authentication result instance, and this authentication result instance has property called access token, as we can see. Okay, great. So right now, let's see what's happening in the Web API project. So now again, let's start from the NuGet packages used in this project. So if I right click on the API project and click Manage NuGet Packages, we can see that in this case, I use Microsoft.identity.web. And this is the new library provided by Microsoft. And right now, in the moment of recording this video, this library is in a preview. But this library enables us, developers, to easily secure our web applications. So in this case, our web API. So let's see how easy it is to provide a secure access to this web API written in the ASP.NET Core. If I close this tab, I will open Startup class and scroll down. And in the Configure Services method, we can see that there are some extensions method used, and those methods are available in this preview library we used. So identity web, and we can see that there is add protected web API method used. So this method enables us to provide secure access to our application. So if the client application will try to call the web API without the access token, there will be unauthorized response return. But also there is a second method called add protected web API calls protected web API, and here we have to also pass the configuration. And the second method enables us to call this ASP.NET Core Web API with the token that we received in the client application, and then we can also call Microsoft Graph API to get the information about the user profile. And of course, we can also cache the tokens. So in this case, we are using memory token cache by adding the method add in-memory token caches. And that's it. And below, also, for ASP.NET Core, we have to add those two lines. So app use authentication and app use authorization. And that's it. And right now, when I open the controller, so user controller in this case, we can see that there is authorized attribute. And here inside this inside this controller, I have a private I have private field. It's iToken acquisition interface used here, and we can use this interface to exchange the token that we received in the client application, to exchange this token with the new token that we can use to call the Microsoft Graph API. So let's see what's happening in the get method. First of all, we have to check the scope. So if we can access this API as user. So we are using verify user has any accepted scope, and we can check whether access as user scope is available. If it's available, we can access user ID that we saw in the Postman response. And then, of course, what we can do, we can try to access name identifier, and we will assign it to owner variable. And then we can also call Graph API on behalf of user. So let's see what's happening in this method. In this method, as you can see, we are using this iToken acquisition interface instance here and using getAccessToken for user async. And with this method, we can get new access token that we will use to call Graph API. So right now, once we have this access token, below in the call Graph API on behalf of user, we can pass this access token in the authorization header, and we can call graph.microsoft.com endpoint, me endpoint in this case, to get information about user profile. And once we have this information, we can return this information in the response. So as you can see, right now we would like to get owner name, and in the response we will have user ID and the name. And this is what we saw in the Postman. Of course, this was only a small overview of Microsoft Identity Platform, and that is why I encourage you to visit official documentation. If you would like to play with the sample I showed during this demo, I encourage you to visit Identity Developer Templates repository available on my GitHub. And if you would like to read more about libraries we used in this demo, so Microsoft Identity Client and Microsoft Identity Web, I encourage you to visit official documentation for those libraries available on GitHub. And of course, links will be provided in the video description. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you have any additional questions, do not hesitate to contact me either on Twitter or LinkedIn. And of course, I encourage you to visit my blog techmindfactory.com. See you in the next video.